Hello, everyone. For those of you, obviously, who have been here before, we are Every Move Collective. For those who don't know, I'm Colby in business with my mom, Eva, my brother, Dylan, who's on the call. We've got our team here. We run a top producing team out of Westchester County, New York, and neighboring Connecticut. We also run this organization, Every Move Collective at EXP, and we host these bi-monthly masterminds. It's an opportunity to learn, network, learn from industry leaders like Laura. And so thank you all for being here. And for those of you who have your camera off, if you're able to turn your camera on, we really encourage it. It just really helps us feel like we're in a room in an increasingly virtual age. And if you can let each other know, let us all know in the chat where you're tuning in from. And also, since this topic is sort of on DISC and how that integrates with being on a team, let us know if you're a team leader or if you're on a team or if you're looking to start a team. Like, just drop that in the chat so we kind of have a feel for who's tuning in. But anyway, we're really grateful to have Laura on with us. Hi, Laura.
Hi, everybody.
And we're going to be talking about DISC profiles and how that integrates with the team, collaboration, productivity. And Laura is the owner and chief life strategist at LMT Consulting. She combines behavioral understanding with experiential coaching to help agents and teams increase their productivity and their profit by focusing on culture, different ways to maximize talent and really improve engagement. And she's been an executive leadership coach for the Harvard Business School. She was a peak performance coach for Tony Robbins, doing over 2,500 hours of one-on-one coaching there, an author of Purposeful Parenting, and is featured in a couple best-selling books. So we're really, really lucky to have her speaking with us today. And I think we're just gonna kind of treat this as a Q&A. Like, we've got some questions that we really want to ask Laura, but if you have any burning questions, like, please raise your hand, chime in, use the chat, whatever it is. Like, we just want to just learn as much as we can from Laura in this hour. But just to kick it off, I think, my mom and Laura, they've known each other from this industry. They go way back in this career. So, Eva and Laura, I know my mom certainly has a kickoff question for you.
Actually, I wanted to just say before we get started, I would like Laura to be able to introduce herself. But I did want to mention to Laura that we gave everyone the opportunity to take a DISC assessment when we sent out the reminder for this call. So everyone has either probably taken a DISC assessment way back when or has done it recently. So when you're chatting, we can, most people should have a sense of who they are. But without further ado, I would love to introduce my good friend for 10 plus years now, I'm sure, and allow her to tell you a little bit about her passion and what she does.
So, Eva, I don't want to date us, but it's been a lot longer than that because I've been out of real estate and coaching full time for more than 12 years. And so we met when I was like in my real estate business. So the cool thing about how I got started with DISC is it started as an agent. I worked for a company. Many of you know Keller Williams used the DISC as a way to help guide people to the part of the industry that best fit them. And what I found is being on the leadership council, my broker was really frustrated. She couldn't figure out why people set these goals and then they, weren't doing what they said they would do to reach them. So I started to say, like, hey, listen, give me their assessment. Let me take a look at it. And I started to look at people's assessments and I'm like, well, wait a second. If this person leads with steadiness and their greatest fear is rejection, then they're not going to go for no. It's not going to be natural. It's not going to be sustainable. So what happened was agents started bringing me their assessments and saying like, hey, can you take a look at this? And I started helping agents build businesses based on who they were rather than here's the skill you need to learn. And so from that, agents started saying like, hey, listen, my husband is looking for a new job, could you help him out? And then I have a youth assessment. People were saying like, my kids are having some trouble in school. Like, can you do an assessment with them? And so it started to expand. And I became obsessed with the assessment. And yet it's really just a tool. It's a tool for curiosity. And so as we begin to talk through today, I have been using the assessment for, I don't know, over 15 years. and specifically using it to help agents and clients reach their goals faster. So I am excited to be here today. Thank you so much to Eva and Colby for the invitation. Whatever I can do to support you in using assessments to help you in your business, you just let me know.
Excellent. And you touched on the key point of understanding DISC profiles, right? So maybe you could start by just giving us a brief overview of the different DISC personality profiles, and how understanding them can enhance a collaboration between employee or employer, et cetera.
Absolutely. Well, so first I like to put an end to a few DISC myths. I think that when people are taking assessments, especially if they've had experience with the assessment before, they come to the table with some misunderstandings. So the first thing that I want to say is it's really important to know there are no good or bad behavioral styles. Every behavioral style is a gift, and it's really understanding how can we use what's natural for us and use our energy to help us reach our goals faster. So an assessment isn't going to tell you that your behavior is good or bad. It's really about how are we using our energy to reach our goals faster. The second thing I like to mention is that behavioral style does not determine success. Old school DISC education used to say that certain behavioral styles could be more successful in certain careers. And that's simply just not the case. It really is, again, you'll hear me say this a lot, all about energy and how are we using our energy, because based on your behavior, some things are going to feel more natural than other things, but that doesn't limit what you can do. It's really a conscious decision of how do you want to use your energy, and how quickly do you want to get to your results. The final thing I like to say is this myth that we can know people just by looking at their graphs. It is so vital that we debrief assessments with people. A lot of times, and again, we're old school way, we used to take the assessment and then whatever dimensions were above the line, we'd be like, oh, I'm a DI or I'm an SC. We are not. We are a combination of all 4 dimensions, and our behavior is impacted by each of those dimensions. And so it is impossible to look at a graph and say, this is what this graph means, because it really has to be debriefed with the person, because you can have 2 people with very similar graphs, and how it shows up is going to be very different based on lots of different things. It could be gender, it could be background, it could be experience, it could be their skill level. So don't make assumptions based on the graphs. So let's look at the graphs. If you have your DISC assessment, I absolutely welcome you to pull it out so that we can talk specifically about what you guys are seeing. Most assessments, and I think the assessment, Colby, did they get the Tony Robbins assessment link?
So it depends. EXP
Okay.
have access to the Abelson report.
Yeah, that's
Non-EXP agents, we distributed a Tony Robbins link, so it's probably a little bit of a mix. And just before we dive in, just because I want to make sure the audience can be, as communicative as they want. I know, Anthony, you had your hand raised, so I want to make sure you can get your question in.
No, I was just going to offer up. I did my DISC a little bit ago, and I was going to offer up to be a guinea pig, share my screen for Laura to basically tell me about me.
well, so we won't get that specific today, but I'd love to tell you about you at another time.
Sounds good.
So perfect. Regardless of the assessment you use, what I like, the Abelson assessment is a TTI assessment. I use the TTI assessment. Abelson was the person who initially trained me in DISC. Did someone else have a question?
No, I think someone was just unmuted. I'm gonna.
By the way, guys, I want to just transfer to Colby in terms of questions and hands, because I'm on my phone and traveling. I don't see the hand raising like normal. So Cole, if you can just jump in on that, and I'll still, continue the questions with Laura.
Yeah.
So both the Abelson DISC and the Robbins DISC, they offer a natural and adapted style graph. Your natural style is your style when you are most comfortable. Your adapted style could change depending on the situation. It could change depending how you were feeling when you took the assessment. Most often, because I give this in a work atmosphere, the adapted style is an indicator of how someone adapts when they are at work. Going back to your natural style, It's interesting. They say your natural style stays your style throughout time, meaning that if you were to take this assessment when you were a youth, and I mentioned I have a youth assessment, if you were to take it at 13 or 14, and then you took it again at 30 or 40 or even 50, the results on your natural style graph would stay the same, meaning the dimensions above the line would stay above the line and the dimensions below the line would stay below the line. The line that I'm talking about is the 50% line. And this is your energy line. Anything above the energy line is natural. Anything below the energy line is simply less natural. And so the idea that your natural style stays the same throughout time, there are some key life circumstances that may cause that to change. It could be anything from a death, it could be a birth, it could be a wedding, it could be a divorce. I've seen severe financial circumstances change someone's natural style. And this is why debriefing becomes so vital, because we can't assume we know based on the assessment. It is also true that people can trick the assessment. And I say this, and my belief is that people don't intentionally trick it, right? They know why they're taking it. And so you can answer according to a role that you want to fill. When you are debriefing, it becomes crystal clear what your natural style is. So I met with a woman, I work with a large group out in the Midwest. I met with a woman who was just coming on board. Her assessment said she led with D and I. As we were going through the assessment, it was crystal clear in her language and how she showed up. Actually, she led with steadiness. And so, you know, it's just something to note. It's a place to get curious. I ask questions around it. I'm not making assumptions, even if I think it's wrong. I'm going to just get insanely curious and ask questions around that. So when we're going back to the graphs, we look at the D is your driver, and this is how you relate to problems and challenges. The I is your influencer, and how you relate to people and context. S is steadiness. This is your regard for pace and consistency. And C is compliance, your regard for procedures and constraints. So here's something that's going to blow all of your minds, because this is a big change from how most people have learned DISC before. Remember a minute ago, I mentioned that the dimensions above the line are as important as those below the line. And that's because when we talk about behavioral intensity, it's actually the distance from the line that matters, right? So it's that distance from the 50% up and the distance between the 50% and below. And so, for instance, many people who, let's say, and I'll just give an example. Let's say the driver and the influencer are above the line and the steadiness and compliance are below the line. If your below the line numbers are below 10, you want to look at how that compares to those dimensions above 10 the other way, right? So it can be that your second leading dimension, your most intense behavior, is actually one below the line. Does that make sense?
I was actually thinking it would be helpful for me to really quickly just share my screen so people can get a visual of
Perfect.
what you mean. And I'm pretty sure this is what you're referring to. This is my disc.
Excellent. Yeah, let me just make this bigger. Colby, it was here a minute ago, it went away.
Can everyone see this?
You know what? Actually, can I share my screen?
Of course.
And there's always Anthony.
Let's see where.
Now I'm curious what he is.
It's actually interesting to hear you say it that way, because
yeah, and of course mine isn't coming up. So Colby, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to share yours.
It's interesting.
So sorry,
because
everybody.
I always thought, like, because I'm a high I, like that means I am an I. But what you're saying is that it's not necessarily who you are. It's more how motivated you are by that indicator.
Well, so I love the language that you're using. So it's really important to know that we are not our DISC behavioral profile. So a lot of times, or we were even taught, I am those dimensions above the line. But because we are a combination, we should never use the words I am before a DISC profile. They are not what we are, because we don't want them defining us. So our behavior leads with, our behavior, indicates. So I'm really careful not to follow I am with DISC profile results. And so for you, Colby, this is your great example. So your leading dimensions are actually, your leading dimensions are your I and your S below the line. Actually, I was on your adapted style, going to your natural style.
Mhm.
Can you explain what the difference between adaptive and natural is?
Sure, I had just mentioned that. Your natural style is when you're most comfortable. Your adapted style is when you're less comfortable.
Okay.
Your natural style stays the same throughout time. Your adapted style can change depending on the circumstance.
Laura, if I could piggyback on that for 1 second. I've
Absolutely.
often heard it said that your adapted style is more how you show up in your work environment or some other environment than your home friendly self environment. Is that not true?
Not necessarily. It really is about where you are most comfortable and where you are less comfortable. If, in fact, the place that you are less comfortable is at work, that may be what we're seeing. But again, I'm getting curious. I'm not making that assumption. And I'll give you an example why. I had a woman that I worked with, and her natural and adapted style were very, very different. And her adapted style was how she showed up at home, because she had a very unique living environment with her family, and she had to adapt. It wasn't accepting of who she was naturally. And so for her, that big an adaptation actually caused a lot of health issues that she had to, address totally separately, but you could see it on the graphs. And so that's why I'm getting curious, like, oh, it's interesting. Your natural and adapted style appear to be different. What are some instances where you feel like you behave differently? And I'm letting them tell me instead of me assuming that I know.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Carlton,
Carlton, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. So what I hear you saying is that our natural style should remain the same. If I've taken the DISC tests multiple times over my lifetime, I should see consistency there. But the adaptive is based on where I'm at in my life right now. That may have some changes to it, is what you're saying?
It may or may not. And it could be adapting based on anything. So I know I've taken countless assessments, different companies, different times of my life. My natural and my adapteds have stayed the same throughout time, and they are not the same. Like the graphs are not the same. I adapt, and that adapted style has stayed the same throughout time. And I know when I do it, it's very conscious, and yet it's adapted when I'm less comfortable.
Okay.
Interesting. I'm going to stop sharing now unless you want me to keep it up.
Well, so just to this point, and thank you for sharing this and for bringing it up. So Colby, in looking at your natural style graph, right, you can see from the energy line, your steadiness is 18 points. Your driver is 17 points above. Your steadiness is 18 points below. Your strongest, most intense behavior is actually your steadiness below the line. And then your driver follows that, and then your influencer, and then your compliance.
You're saying S is my S is my strongest behavior?
Correct?
In what way?
No, that doesn't make sense.
It does, because when we look at behavior, we're talking about intensity from this line. So the challenge is the way the assessments come up, it goes 0 to 100. So everyone thinks, oh, the greater the number, the more significant it is. Here, the way DISC works is its intensity from this line. And so these descriptors, if you go, Colby, do you have the descriptors page in this assessment?
Should, let me just,
Yeah, just go up. Yeah, actually, I can see it, page 14. So what this page does, this is my most favorite page in the assessment because it takes your natural style graphs and it gives you descriptors for those behaviors above the line as well as those below the line. So you can see for Colby, her steadiness below the line, this behavior is as strong as her dominance above the line. And then you have your influencer and your compliance. So it's intensity from the 50%.
that's really interesting. And I've never understood DISC in that way.
And it is not taught that way. And it is mistaught, which is why I include this page in every debrief that I do. Because once you start to see, like for instance, I'll have agents, especially in real estate, who will come to me and they will believe that they are dominance above the line, when in fact, it's their compliance below the line, firm, independent, self-willed, obstinate. And they'll say, but wait, I thought I was dominant above the line. I said, well, let me ask you this. Are you externally expressive? Do you prefer external attention? They're like, no, 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 no. Ah, that's why. Because what we're really talking about is that compliance below the line.
Mm-hmm. Carlton has another question, it looks like.
Yes, I am also a former Keller Williams agent, and I've done multiple of their tests, the DISC, and they had another one. But I always had a team leader who helped decipher what the test said. Now, I'm going to do the test again without, do you recommend having somebody who studies the test as you, such as yourself, helps you to determine what you're seeing in the test, or I can figure it out myself by reading just all of the details of the test?
So that's a great question. I always recommend a debrief. The challenge is that if debriefing this assessment isn't something that they do all of the time, it is likely that they are doing it based on their behavioral style. And so when I'm going through this assessment, because I have literally debriefed thousands of them, I am assuming nothing and I'm asking questions. I am not telling anyone anything about themselves. My goal is to figure out, how does this show up for you? And then how can we use this information to help you build your business in a way that's completely natural for you?
Excellent. I mean, I get that.
Yeah, so I feel like
But me doing the test again without having a debrief doesn't serve me well, because I'm not going to be able to implement well from the details without having someone who's an expert in it. And I can tell your expertise in it just because of how you're communicating about it. So how do we find you?
Oh, don't worry. You found her now. We will make sure you have her info. Actually, Laura, that leads right into a question that I had for you about leadership tailoring. How can leaders, like the people that are on this call, like yourself, effectively tailor their leadership approach based on their DISC profiles to foster more harmonious and efficient work environments?
Okay, so this is a fantastic question. And what's funny is that the way I talk about leading is the same way I talk about parenting. And the biggest mistake that we make is we tend to lead and parent based on our behavioral style. And so the most important thing you can do is understand the people that you're working with and or your children. And a lot of it is not changing who you are, but adapting your language so they can hear you, right? This is a really key distinction, is that where if you try to change your behavioral style, it will take a lot of energy. So the idea is that we learn key language skills to help other behavioral styles hear us. So what does that mean? Well, so I have some of my favorite techniques that I use, and I'll say these with caution. They work most of the time. Nothing works all of the time. But so some key language changes that I make is when I'm working with someone who's high driver, keeping in mind that high drivers, they know a lot of information. And so one of the things I use to get their attention is to say, as you already know, because their brain neurologically is going to trigger and go, wait a second, what do I know? So you've got their attention. Then you can say whatever you want in the middle. As you already know, the market is shifting and this is the best time to buy a house. Wouldn't you agree? Well, they're not going to disagree with themselves. And so they're like, oh, yes, yes. Now, they may later find, oh, wait, I don't agree with that. But you've planted the seed, which is the most important thing with that driver, is to get them to hear you. So that's what I use with drivers. For influencers, I'm often talking about the ideal experience. Like, what would your ideal experience look like? You're going to join my team. What's your ideal characteristic of your workplace? I want to know the first words that come to their mind. I'm listening to what they say, and then I'm going, what does that mean to you? I'm not assuming I know what they mean. I want to know what they tell me they mean. With steadiness, I know a lot of times I'm working with leaders who hire people who lead with steadiness. That's their admin. And so for people who lead with steadiness, they have a lot of questions. And so the thing that I ask people who lead with steadiness is, what are the 3 most important questions you need answered to feel confident and comfortable taking action right now? So I've created a sense of urgency. I've limited their number of questions to the top 3. And I've given them, 3 opportunities to ask, an opportunity to ask 2 more questions than I would normally answer, right? And then with compliance, compliance, they want information and they'll often turn to you for proof. However, the irony is you can never give them proof that they will believe. And so it will be really important to ask them, what information can I provide you so you can create the proof you need to move forward? And I will tell you that with each one of these, I have used them with a client or a staff member or a leader, and they work. So again, I'm not adapting my behavior. I'm learning some tricks in my language to have other behaviors hear me better.
And these are the types of questions that you would use to boost team performance by positioning your questions this way?
Well, so it's about communicating with their style. So that's automatically going to create a connection with people, right? Then I have to be honest, when I'm looking at boosting team performance, I'm really diving into what motivates them. Both the Abelson assessment as well as the Tony Robbins assessment includes a motivators section. It's really important for people to know that behavior plays a huge role in how we show up, but man, motivators drives what we do every single day. And again, in debriefing this with thousands of people, I know motivators can override a behavioral style. So I'll give you an example. I worked with a gentleman when I was with Tony Robbins. He was a top salesperson and he led with steadiness and influencer. And he was constantly told by other people in his company that he could never be a top salesman, which was really strange because he was number 1 and number 2 every single month. Because when we got to his motivators, resourceful, that return on investment of time, energy, and money was his number 1 motivator. And so he created a schedule that allowed him to go to the right people so he could close the most deals, so he could go back and spend more time with his family. Right? And so when we're talking about productivity in our teams, it's important to understand behavior. Equally important is to incorporate that additional assessment and look at the motivators. Does that help, Eva?
Absolutely. What comes to mind when I hear that answer is that that person that you're using as an example, and many people are aware or self-aware of how to actually get that, the more time with, to get to the more time with family, he needed to take these steps to have that success. So how do you help people outside of just going through the disc once, Is it something that is like a work in progress? Like people say, evaluating the disc is so important. Is it something that you work with somebody on in your practice, or is it just a one-time thing and then people revisit it when they want?
So I heard a couple of different questions. So first and foremost, when we look at using an assessment, it's important to reference it and come back to it, because oftentimes we know how we show up, but we don't have the language to explain it to others. So you had talked about people being self-aware. We kind of know, but we don't really know where it comes from, right? So we go back to the person who thought they were driver, but they were really compliance below the line. We give them some language to explain how they show up and why they're doing what they're doing. Like the gentleman who, was really heavy on ROI in terms of what motivated him, so he could go spend time with his family. Before the assessment, he was doing it, but he didn't really understand why he was doing it and really how brilliantly intentional it was. The other part of it is most people aren't that intentional, right? We get so much information at us every single day. It's hard to filter through what's natural for us. And so
Right.
often we're getting lost in the noise. And so this is a really great grounding tool to bring people back, especially in the real estate industry. I know, again, being an agent, it was go for no, go for no, go for no. Well, for the majority of the population, which, oh, by the way, the majority of the population leads with steadiness, go for no doesn't work long term. It is a quick, fast boost. It's simply not sustainable, because if your greatest fear is rejection, it's energetically exhausting to pretend to go for no 3 hours a day. And so this notion that we're giving people language and we're helping people understand what motivates them and how their behavior shows up is really the key, and referencing back to it. So I have my longest client. I've been working with her for 14 years. And we're constantly going back to the assessment. And I'm like, okay, well, wait a second. Here's where you are now in your business. Remember way back when we took this, right? She's taken it a couple times over the 12 years. But the idea is that we're constantly building and growing, which means we've got to reference back to the core, right? Because her business has changed. Like 4 times she's bought 2 new businesses, right? And so that idea that we're constantly growing, it means that we've got to come back to the core and reference it.
Excellent.
Essentially, when you understand the intensity of each DISC for yourself as it relates to that middle line, like once you understand where you fall, that can not only influence the language that you use to communicate both with clients and people on your team, but it can also influence the way you set up your day, like certain activities that might be energizing versus draining. Like maybe you think you're supposed to do something because that's what someone with an entirely different, behavioral style might do, and that's energizing for them, but maybe it's not for you. And so that might not be the most best way to lead generate, for example.
Love that you mentioned that, Colby. This is so key, because regardless of the real estate business or whatever business you're in, this idea of modeling becomes really important, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. However, you've got to be picking people to model who have a similar behavioral style than you, right? So all too often I'll meet with an agent who's like, I want to be like that agent. So that's really interesting. What about that agent do you appreciate? And they'll give me all of these characteristics, and I'll say, oh, on a scale of 1 to 10, how natural are those for you? Oh, they're not natural for me. Okay, so you can admire that agent. However, it will be energetically exhausting for you to build your business that way. And so let's look at some ways that may be a better fit. Who can you find who has a more similar behavioral style to you, and you can model their techniques, right? And so we are looking at how can we not only stack our business, but also our day. Colby, you just mentioned, I was working with an agent last week, and she didn't mind making calls, but she's like, oh, I start off, and like if I get 3 bad calls, like I just will stop because it's a bummer for me. I said, okay, well, so fantastic. How about starting with 3 people who love you? They'll tell you great things about yourself. You will feel good when you get off the call. And then you can take that energy, right? We're talking about energy and momentum. The more energy and momentum we build, the more energy and momentum that goes out, the more energy and momentum that comes back, right? And so she was like, oh, never even thought of that. I said, okay, let's just try it that way, right? So absolutely, you can use this in every part of your day, every part of your week, and your business. Anthony.
So the point that you just made about, hey, there's an agent that you are admiring and all the reasons why you admire them, blah, and so forth, right? And then you teed off with, well, maybe let's look at another agent that might be more in line with you. Forgive me, I might be wrong here, but my challenge back to that is, well, that agent's going to have the same kind of results that you're having. So how is it possible that they're like-minded with you and you're going to achieve better results?
Awesome question. And based on that question, Anthony, I want you to push back if I'm inaccurate. What I'm hearing is that you're suggesting in that question that only certain behavioral styles are successful. And what I'm saying, and I know with 100% certainty, because I have coached thousands of people, is that there is success in every single behavioral style. And so it is finding people who have that type of behavioral style that is a match for you so you can model that success. It is not, to your point, the idea that you model someone just because you have a similar behavioral style and they have a crappy business.
But aren't the behavioral styles, if the behavioral styles are similar, aren't the end results the same? And maybe I'm missing it.
Yeah.
Apologize.
No, that's okay. I appreciate this because this is one of the misconceptions, right? Behavioral style does not determine success. When I'm teaching this, I am saying that Bill Gates, who leads with compliance, is as successful as Oprah Winfrey, right? I am suggesting that Mahatma Gandhi is as successful as Shaquille O'Neal. They all four of those people have very different behavioral styles. All four of them are successes in their own right. And so it's the same thing when we're looking at any level of success. There are people with each behavioral style who are successful, and it's finding those people and modeling them.
Okay, so, and again, I don't want to dominate this. Let's say I model, or my disc is almost identical to the Shaq. There's no way. I'm not 6'9" or however tall he is, and can have that kind of success. So I'm having trouble with that grasping that I get different styles of behaviors will have their own successes or failures based upon the individual themselves. So if I'm modeling somebody that has, well, maybe I just answered my question. If I'm modeling somebody that has the same type of behavioral personalities and they're successful, it's a matter of trying to dive into what it is that they're doing and change my mindset to say, okay, wait a minute.
Yes.
I'm not doing this. So is that
that's what we're talking about. And I love that you just mentioned mindset, right? Because it is about understanding the mindset. A lot of people will go to the doing, like what are the skills? What are the things I need to learn? The mindset is the key, right? How committed are you to your own success? And I think that this is one of the things where we fool ourselves, right? Is we say that we're committed, but, right? Commitment is commitment is commitment. If you are 100% committed to finding someone in your industry who has your behavioral style, who is a success, you will find them. If you are not committed, you will find all the reasons why you can't find that person. Because remember, your brain has two jobs: to answer your questions and prove you're right. It will always do that. And so it's really important that we're conscientious about the questions that we're asking ourselves and where we're looking for those answers. And so 100%, it's mindset, it's skill, it's modeling, people who are like us.
Thank you.
Does that help? Erin.
Now I just really want to find someone that models me, and I feel, yeah, how do I do that? Because I feel like the people that I am hanging around want the same thing, but probably do not work the same way that I do.
Great observation. And I promise you, remember what I just said, your brain has two jobs: to answer your questions and prove you're right. And so I would be asking myself a lot of questions to help me find what I'm looking for. Here's the other key is, and this is why I love this assessment, because I use it, I mentioned, as a place to get curious, is don't expect the answer to come right away. Practice asking yourself questions and you don't know where they're going to lead to. Your brain will find the answer. It could be a week, it could be a couple hours. I actually listened to this gentleman who, for every day, for 30 minutes, he just writes questions to himself, open-ended questions. It could be about a business, it could be about his day. I will tell you, I've tried to do this. I can't do it for 30 minutes. So I write 3 questions, random questions, just for the day. And I just wait and see when they get answered. It is fascinating how you will find the answers. So asking yourself the questions that will lead you to the person or people who you could model, it will happen.
Like, yeah, what kind of questions? Give us some broad examples, if you will, just to get our brains thinking that.
Absolutely. What are the characteristics of someone I would like to model? Who are some people I admire? What are the types of things that I enjoy doing most? Where are the people who also enjoy doing those things? Those are just 4 quick ones.
Those are good. Those are good.
Laura,
And those are just like to ponder, and
Yeah.
they're not going to come to you right away, and
That's
even in
right.
probably one day. But
Absolutely. And it's so cool because you're planting the seed. So remember, your brain's getting all this information. Instead of responding to the information that's out there, your brain is going out and looking for it. That's the difference. This is our ability to control our own mindset. And I will tell you, 99.9% of people don't use it. It's amazing. Erin, your hand has been raised for so long. You're so patient.
Oh,
Yes.
Right.
No, that's okay, Cindy.
Could you speak to how to think about the energy difference when our numbers are above versus below? So my natural and adaptive, there are some things that switch. And yeah, just that, you said it's energy. I kind of get that, but isn't there some distinction between energy above and energy below?
So great questions, and I hear 2. So the first one, I'll answer the first one because I'll answer the second one because it'll help us get to the first one. So the difference between the energy above and below the line, no, because remember, we're talking about intensity from the line, right? So that's number 1. However, when we're looking between natural and adapted, this is where we can get really curious, right? So how does this adaptation show up? I will say, and this is an example that I use all the time, is there used to be an assumption that if you adapt, it's energetically exhausting and it's horrible. Until I run into this client and his leading dimension on the adapted is driver, but his leading dimensions, and it was like a single one on the adapted, his leading dimensions on the natural style were steadiness and compliance above the line. And so I said, oh, this is really interesting. So, do you find that you have any difference in energy and how you show up at work? Because he had indicated when he took the assessment adapted, he was thinking about work. And he's like, no, I love my work. He said, I don't have a lot of opportunity to lead at work, but he was working in an architectural firm. He said, but I really love what I do. And I said, well, so I'm curious, is there any place outside of work where you use that high driver? And he said, oh yeah, I do extreme sports every weekend. Okay. So he had this driver in him that he just didn't use in the workplace, but it didn't really matter because he had this thing outside of work that allowed him to release that energy.
This is going to be an odd question, but I'm just going to throw it out anyway.
Wait, so, Cindy, 1 second. Aaron, you still look a
Sorry.
little perplexed. No, that's okay. Did that not answer your question?
Well, maybe I just need to think about it more. I guess, for example, my S is a 16 natural and a 55 adaptive.
And so, some of the questions that I would have you ask yourselves are, on a scale of 1 to 10, how often do I notice my need for steadiness increase when I'm less comfortable? What are the circumstances that would create a desire for increased steadiness when I'm less comfortable? How does steadiness show up when I'm less comfortable?
Well, I recognize that it happens, so I can think of that already.
Okay. And so ask yourself some questions around that and kind of see where your mind goes. Cindy.
Just maybe some advice or thought process or additional resources for someone that probably has attention issues, as well as trying to learn their style of working, like we're talking about today.
Repeat the question. Was it attention issues?
Like ADD, somebody that's really, like all over the place, but then you have to incorporate into your style. And to me, that just, I'm having an issue with that.
So here's what's interesting. So when we look at a number of different disorders, attention deficit disorder, any of a number of other disorders, because that definition has become so broad, I feel like there are some other ways we can work with it. And so I look at behavior as being a huge one, because when we think and learn differently, and if we're fast paced, it can appear that we have attention deficit. We may, right? You want to be tested. However, it's not in all cases. So the first thing that I'm doing is I'm looking for areas where there is success in attention. What are some times in your life where your attention is very focused, where you're able to stay on task? And then I'm saying, okay, what are the characteristics of that? And then how can I apply that to what I'm doing now, or an area where I don't have attention? I will tell you, I often use my daughter in this example because I had a youth assessment. I was constantly told since she was in preschool that she should be tested for attention deficit disorder. It was something that I just felt that because I knew behavior, we could work through. And so we used a whole bunch of different techniques. And over time, as she got older, we had to change those techniques up because they stopped working, everybody, right? As we're growing, we've got to learn how to change our techniques up. And so I'll use her just as a specific example. The first thing for her was getting in some physical exercise. She had a lot of energy bent up. Once we started physical exercise, she had picked up running. That made a huge difference in her life. Then when we were looking at certain areas of study, so she would get really good grades in English and history, but math was like horrible. What we learned is in an area where she is less comfortable, she goes off and she gets very distracted very easily. Okay, so how can we incorporate some of the things she enjoyed? And again, she was in middle school. That she enjoyed when she was focused. Well, she loves to teach. She loves to be the teacher. So she would take all of her math lessons, and throughout middle school, she would create me PowerPoint presentations, and I learned math. I learned middle school math for 3 years because it got her attention. In order for her to teach me, she had to learn it better. And she got that extra practice in teaching it to me, right? And so when you're looking at behavior, it's what is the workaround? How can I work around this? And it's amazing the things that you can come up with. Again, if you feel like it is to a point where it's debilitating, then you want to go get support and help. Even with that support and help, sometimes we need these little tricks to help us create the workaround.
Thank you.
Colby.
And I just raised my hand.
Oh.
So my understanding, as you address Anthony's question, there is success in all behavioral styles. And one of the questions that comes up for me when I hear that is, okay, obviously we're a room full of real estate agents largely. And so have you, as a coach who has spent a lot of time coaching real estate agents, seen success in all different behavioral styles in realtors? And to add on to that question, like obviously we don't always know what someone's disc results are, so we sort of have to like infer based on sometimes literally their social media, like someone who we admire on social media has a really robust business and we want to model their business model. How do we even know that there are disc type? Does that make sense?
100%. So great question. First, yes, I have personally coached realtors in every single one of the dimensions, successful realtors, highly successful, top producing teams, 100%. So I can say with 100% confidence that there are realtors who are successful in every single behavioral style, number one. Number two, how do you know someone's behavioral style? Well, so it is a little bit of a guessing game. There are also some observations you can make, and you want to be asking them questions. The other challenge that we face is when we're looking for someone to model, someone to mentor, we get so excited about the person, their personality, their persona, what we see on stage, or what we've observed in them, that we aren't asking them the tough questions. Like, quite frankly, are you the right match for us? So the idea is to remove this notion that, okay, it's good or bad. It's simply, are you the right match? And so I am coming up with questions that I can ask them. And I'm also looking at the things that I can observe. So let's talk about the simple things that we can observe. If you're watching someone, the two key indicators of your influencer and your driver are they are fast-paced and external. And I say external, not extroverted. And this distinction is really important because they go external for counsel. They express themselves externally. They also like external recognition. They're fast-paced, they speak fast, they talk fast, they do fast. Your S and your C behavioral styles are more internal, meaning they go internal for counsel. They're quieter. They tend to be the observers. They're also slower paced. They make their decisions slower. They think a lot longer, right? And so you can kind of make those observations. It's also key indicators are the driver and the compliance are task orientated, meaning they tend to focus on the task and getting things done, while influencer and steadiness are more people orientated. They focus on the people part of things. And so those are some sort of external observations. Once we get serious about bringing on or following someone or being mentored by someone, that's when I'm sitting down and having a meeting, right? And I'm asking them questions about what's important to them, about what motivates them, about how they conduct their business, right? And then I'm scaling their answers on a scale of 1 to 10 on how well do they match me. Right? So, what's your number one lead generation source? Oh, my lead generation source is I had this gentleman who I admired so much. He made 100 calls every single day. He sent me a sheet. I had these 100 bubbles. I was going to make 100 calls. Who was I kidding? I was never going to make 100 calls every day. I started it. I was a strong starter, but that wasn't something that was sustainable for me. His behavioral style was very much compliance. This little system worked for him. He would go on 15-minute presentations because he qualified his sellers. He did not have any buyers. He only worked with sellers. It was him, his wife, and an admin. And he did over 100 units a year. And I was like, I can be like him. Look at my personality. Am I filling in dots and making mechanical calls, 100 of them every day? No, it wasn't sustainable. But so it's that idea of how much do I align with this practice on a scale of 1 to 10? That was a 2 for me, but man, I gave it a 10 of a try. And then when it didn't work, I moved on.
Yeah,
I think that's That's really great advice, right? You give it a hell of a try, and then if it doesn't work, you don't feel beat up. Just move on to a
Eva,
different tactic.
that is so important. And this is what I say to all of my clients. If my client has a specific behavioral style and they want to do something that I know is not going to be a long-term match for them, I don't care. That's not my decision to make. I say, absolutely, go for it. Don't be disappointed if it doesn't work out, because based on your assessment, energetically, that may not be a match for you. It may. I love to be proven wrong. I mean, this is what I'm saying to my agents, because I want them to try on anything. It's not my job to tell them they can't do anything. That's not where I come in. I come in to support them on what they say they want to do, and then hold them accountable for carrying through. So the idea is, did you do what you said? You didn't. What were the reasons, right? I want to find out what prevented them from doing it, because then we tend to see the energy that, oh, that's interesting. That didn't work out for you. Okay, fantastic. Next, what are we doing next? Move on.
Love that. I'm sorry, again.
It just kind of reminds me of, for me, I do cold calling, warm calling, something that I had a lot of resistance to going into that process. I had to work through a lot of fear to do it. Once I worked through the fear, it became more enjoyable and energizing for me. However, to your point earlier, I start my calling days by calling warm relationships because it starts me off on the right foot. And I really put an emphasis on quality over quantity. So I'm not using a dialer to do my calls. I'm looking someone up and that's just what works for me. So cold calling maybe isn't like the most aligned with my personality. I don't know, but because I'm using it to see how I can find success in it, I'm doing it in a way that my behavioral style meshes with it.
This is an ideal example of how you use behavioral style to work through anything. A behavioral style does not prevent you from doing anything. How are we going to do it? And you just talked about your workaround. I mean, that is absolutely perfect. Awesome. Such a great example, Colby.
Yeah.
And on that note, I just wanted to say that we are nearing the 2 o'clock hour or 3 o'clock hour. I'm in Central here. So I do want to take a moment to thank Laura so much for her contributions here today and ask, is there one maybe action item or piece of advice or something you want to leave the group with before we wrap?
I would say the biggest piece of advice, whether we're talking about behavioral style, whether we're talking about working with our teams, whether we're talking about working with our clients, ask more questions. Ask more questions. Practice asking questions. It will get you so far, so fast. It will help in every aspect of your business and life.
Good advice. I'm writing it down. It's going to be on my desk. Ask more questions for myself, not to other people.
Both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, especially when if you're looking to have someone join your team, there's sort of like an interview process, asking questions is built in, but sometimes with clients, that's not the approach that we take. So I think it's really important, like when we're looking to, attract the right clients, align ourselves with clients we want to be working with, and also just get a better understanding of if that client is, where they fall on the disc.
And I know we're running out of time. Just to talk about the hiring process. I mean, most of my clients outside of agents are people looking for the next step up in their career, or they're looking to hire. I will tell you, the biggest mistake people make in interviewing and being the interviewee is that they don't ask enough questions because they're so busy trying to be chosen that they're not getting insanely curious on if this job is a match for me. So if you're hiring a team, I would say I have my clients come up with at least 30 questions. You're not going to get to all of them, but it's going to keep the conversation rolling and have you go much deeper, much faster than you would on your own.
Awesome.
Thank you so much,
Hope
Laura.
this was
I really
helpful.
appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Good stuff.
Incredibly
cool.
Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. And reach out to me. I don't know how if you have questions about assessments, I'm happy to get on another call. I'm happy to look at assessments and answer specific questions. I mean, this is what I do every single day. I love it. I eat it up. So whatever I can do to support you in being, the best agent you can be and being the best people you can be, you just reach out to me and let me know.
How do we find you, Laura?
You guys tell me, do you want my
Yeah, Colby,
Eva, how does that usually work?
Well,
call.
Can you drop it in the chat?
we always
can.
send a follow-up email after this call to everyone who registered. So we'll send you all the info. We can send Laura's email, phone. Laura, if you want to just right now drop your phone, email, whatever your preferred communication is in the chat. And then I can also make sure it's emailed out so everyone has it.
Yeah, it's definitely email. If you try to call me, you likely will not get me. But email, I will respond.
Yeah, I
And
just
just
found your website. So purposeful-life.co.
Yes. Well, and you can do Laura Treonze .com as well. It will
Okay.
take you it'll take you the exact same place. Also,
Okay.
I have a ton of free stuff on YouTube. I mean, it's
Oh,
outdated in that I haven't created new content in a really long time, but I spent like 4 years just creating content. So there's a ton of content out there for you guys to go and take a look at, free access. And gives you a lot of insight both into behavior and questions and parenting, and it's all over the place.
And we also, when Colby sends out the email after the call, we will send a recording. So if anybody wants to go back and listen to some of the things that Laura talked about in more detail, along with the contact information and our future events, will all be in the email that we send out.
Awesome. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me. Eva, it's so good to see you. Colby, it was good to see you again. This is such a great team, a great family. I'm honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll reach out to you as soon as I'm home.
Okay. Have fun.
Thank-
Travel safe.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon.